Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that everything you want, the success, the confidence, the freedom, the power, isn't hiding in your future, it's hiding in your patterns? Every thought you repeat, every emotion you tolerate, every habit you live by is either building your destiny or burying it. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your patterns. And if you can master the rhythms that shape your mind, you can rewrite every limitation that's ever held you back. Because once you control your patterns, you become truly, absolutely unstoppable. And every single day, whether you realize it or not, you are living by patterns. Patterns of thought, patterns of emotion, patterns of behavior, and those patterns are either building your destiny or breaking it. Because here's the truth, success is not about doing one great thing once. It's about doing the right things consistently. It's about mastering the patterns that move you forward instead of being trapped by the ones that hold you back. And you can't escape patterns, they are the invisible strings pulling the direction of your life. Think about it, when you wake up, how do you feel? Do you immediately reach for your phone, scroll, compare, and start your day reactive? That's a pattern. Or do you wake up with purpose, breathe deep, and remind yourself who the hell you are and what you're here to do? That's also a pattern. One weakens you, the other strengthens you. The difference between an extraordinary life and a mediocre one comes down to the patterns you condition into yourself every single day. And people don't suddenly become confident, wealthy, fulfilled, or driven. They train themselves through repetition. They build internal wiring that says, "This is who I am." If you do something enough times with intensity and emotion, your nervous system accepts it as truth. And once it's locked in as truth, it becomes automatic. That's why change doesn't last for most people. They try to change their behavior for a few days, but they never replace the underlying pattern that created it in the first place. They're fighting a giant with a paper sword, and the moment you understand that your patterns are programmable, your life changes forever. Because now, you're no longer a victim of your past, your environment, or your emotions. You're the architect of your future. You can literally rewire your brain, your habits, and your identity by interrupting the old patterns that keep you stuck and conditioning new ones that align with the person you want to become. And let me give you an example. Someone says they want to get fit. They start with motivation, the energy is high, the vision is clear. But a week later, they fall off track. Why? Because their pattern isn't built yet. Their old pattern says, "I'm tired, I'll go tomorrow." Their new pattern hasn't been reinforced enough to override the old one. The same thing happens in business, relationships, or mindset. You might want change, but wanting isn't enough. You must install new rituals that run deeper than your excuses. And repetition with emotion creates mastery. You've got to feel the new pattern while you're building it. When you visualize your success, when you act like the person you want to become, when you move your body like it's already true, your brain starts believing it. You're literally sending new signals to your nervous system saying, "This is me now." You've got to make that new identity feel familiar. Because the human mind craves what's familiar, not what's ideal, and think about someone who's always negative. They're not negative by nature. They've just repeated the pattern of complaining, blaming, and doubting so many times that their brain thinks that's safety. They've trained themselves to expect disappointment, so even when good things happen, they find a way to sabotage it. Why? Because the old pattern is running the show, but what happens when that person decides to interrupt that pattern? What if every time the thought "I can't" comes up, they stand up, move, breathe differently, and replace it with "Watch me"? That one act, that pattern interrupt, starts rewiring their brain. Do it once and nothing changes. Do it 10 times and the brain starts noticing. Do it 100 times and it becomes the new normal. Suddenly, that same person becomes unstoppable, not because life got easier, but because their pattern did. And it's not talent, it's not luck, It's pattern mastery. Every high performer you've ever admired has patterns of focus, patterns of discipline, patterns of meaning. When they fail, they don't spiral into self-pity. That's not their pattern. Their pattern is to extract the lesson, adjust, and move. When they wake up, they don't wonder what kind of day it's going to be. Their pattern is to decide. When they face fear, their pattern is not to freeze but to face it. Those patterns make them unstoppable. And if they can condition those patterns, so can you. It doesn't matter where you started. You can come from pain, poverty, rejection. It doesn't matter. What matters is whether you're willing to become conscious of your patterns and rewrite them. Every breakthrough begins the moment you stop being blind to what you're repeating. When you can see your pattern clearly, you can change it. When you can interrupt it, you can replace it. And when you replace it with something empowering, your entire life starts to shift, not in theory, but in reality. And the fastest way to change your life is to change your emotional pattern. Emotion is energy in motion. If your dominant pattern is stress, fear, or anger, then no strategy in the world will save you because you're operating from the wrong state. But if you build a pattern of gratitude, certainty, and determination, you become a force of nature. You stop waiting for external motivation because you've conditioned internal momentum, and ask yourself right now, what patterns have you been running? The patterns of distraction, procrastination, and doubt, or the patterns of focus, discipline, and courage? Because whichever pattern you feed will dominate your destiny. If you keep choosing the same emotional reactions, the same habits, the same stories, don't be surprised when your life feels the same. But if you change the pattern, if you change how you move, how you think, how you breathe, how you speak, everything changes with it. And you want to know the truth. Your life is a reflection of the standards you tolerate, and your standards are maintained by your patterns. If your pattern is to settle, you'll always find reasons to justify staying small. But if your pattern is to demand more of yourself, to push when it's hard, to expect greatness, then nothing can stop you. Because patterns become identity, and identity drives destiny. And when you build the right patterns, you don't have to force success. It becomes inevitable. You don't have to fight for motivation. It's already built into your rhythm. You don't have to beg for confidence. It's encoded in your movement. You walk differently, talk differently, show up differently, and people can feel it. You become magnetic because consistency creates power. And here's the key. Don't wait for perfect conditions to start building new patterns. Start now. Start when it's uncomfortable. Start when it's inconvenient. That's how transformation begins. Because if you only follow your patterns when it's easy, you'll never grow strong enough to handle what's hard. Every time you feel resistance, that's your cue to install a stronger pattern. Resistance is the signal for growth, not retreat. And you have to train your brain to associate pain with the old patterns that limit you and pleasure with the new ones that empower you. Because once your nervous system links enough pain to staying the same and enough pleasure to evolving, change becomes automatic. You won't have to push yourself anymore. You'll be pulled by your vision, by your new identity, by your unstoppable momentum. And so ask yourself, what would happen if you mastered your patterns? What if your pattern was relentless focus? What if your pattern was daily gratitude? What if your pattern was taking massive action no matter how you feel? You'd become unstoppable, not because you're special, but because your patterns would make it impossible to fail. And every day, you're rehearsing who you are becoming. Every thought, every breath, every movement is a rehearsal. So, stop rehearsing limitation, stop rehearsing fear, stop rehearsing hesitation, start rehearsing greatness, resilience, power, and passion. Because when you repeat the right patterns long enough, you don't just change your habits, you change your destiny. And once that happens, once your patterns align with your purpose, no obstacle can hold you back, no fear can control you, and no challenge can break you. Because patterns, the ones you consciously choose, can make you truly, utterly, completely unstoppable. And when you finally start to recognize that everything you do is part of a pattern, your thoughts, your language, your movement, your focus, you realize that you hold the remote control to your own destiny. Every result you've ever achieved was the direct result of a pattern you either reinforced or neglected. Success is never a mystery when you study the pattern that created it, and failure isn't random either. It's just the outcome of an old, unconscious loop that's been left unchallenged. And you see, the body follows the mind, and the mind follows what it's trained to focus on. Most people have trained their minds to see problems, not possibilities. They wake up and instantly tune into what's missing, what's wrong, what could go wrong, and that becomes their pattern. That's why two people can face the exact same challenge and have completely different outcomes. One person crumbles, the other rises. It's not the event that defines them, it's their pattern of interpretation, their habitual meaning. And if your pattern is to see setbacks as signs that you're not enough, you'll stop every time it gets hard. But if your pattern is to see setbacks as proof that you're growing, you'll push harder every time you fall. The moment you shift that internal meaning, you shift the pattern forever. Because the meaning you attach to your experiences determines your emotional pattern, and your emotional pattern dictates your actions. And think about it, every decision you've ever made came from a state. When you're in a state of fear, you play small. When you're in a state of certainty, you take bold action, and those states are just emotional patterns. If you build a pattern of getting yourself into powerful states, no matter the circumstances, you can face anything. That's why the strongest people aren't the ones who avoid challenges. They're the ones who have trained their nervous system to stay resourceful through them. And your physiology, your movement, your breathing, they all trigger patterns in your mind. You can't think like a winner while you move like a victim. Change your body, and you can instantly change your state. You can't stand tall, breathe deep, look up, and stay depressed. It's physically incompatible. That's why the most successful people move with energy, with certainty, with intensity, because they've learned that emotion follows motion. Their pattern isn't to wait until they feel ready. Their pattern is to make themselves ready through action. And let's talk about action because it's the great pattern breaker. The moment you act in spite of fear, you teach your brain a new truth that fear isn't fatal. Every time you delay, you reinforce the pattern of hesitation. Every time you take action, even small, you reinforce the pattern of momentum. Action builds evidence, and evidence builds identity. You start to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who moves regardless of emotion, someone who makes things happen. That's how new patterns get locked in, through repeated, emotionally charged action. But here's the problem. Most people are addicted to the wrong patterns. The pattern of overthinking, the pattern of waiting, the pattern of needing certainty before moving. These patterns feel safe because they're familiar, but they're the silent killers of progress. You have to be willing to disrupt your comfort to create a new pattern of growth. Comfort never rewires you, struggle does, challenge does, repetition through uncertainty does, and the question is, what are you rehearsing every day? Because every repetition is a rehearsal for your future. If you rehearse doubt, you'll perform doubt. If you rehearse courage, you'll perform courage. Every moment of hesitation is a micro decision that builds your next identity. And identity is nothing more than the sum of your dominant patterns, and you might think, but I've tried before and failed. Of course you have. Everyone has, but that's part of the pattern too. You didn't fail because you're weak, you failed because you didn't stick around long enough for the new pattern to replace the old one. The brain needs repetition, it needs consistency. If you plant a seed and dig it up every 2 days to check if it's growing, you kill it. The same goes for your habits, your mindset, your rituals. You've got to feed the new pattern until it becomes stronger than the old. And when you master this, you stop needing external motivation. You stop relying on hype or inspiration because your pattern becomes your fuel. You start operating from identity, not effort. You don't have to push yourself to act like a leader, you simply are one. You don't have to force discipline, it's part of who you are. That's when life shifts from being something you chase to something you command. And you don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight to begin this process. All you need is to change one pattern at a time. Just one. Change the way you start your day, change the way you respond to stress, change the way you speak to yourself. Those little shifts compound into massive transformation. One empowered pattern can replace 1,000 disempowering ones if you live it with full conviction. And think about the pattern of gratitude. It's one of the simplest yet most powerful patterns you can build. Because gratitude destroys fear. You can't be grateful and afraid at the same time. You can't be grateful and angry at the same time. Gratitude rewires the brain to focus on what's abundant instead of what's missing. So, if you make it a pattern to find 3 things every day that you're grateful for, no matter how small, you're retraining your mind to operate from abundance, not scarcity. Or take the pattern of contribution. When your pattern is to give, to serve, to add value, you stop living in your head. You shift from what can I get to what can I give. That single shift changes your entire emotional pattern. Because contribution is the highest form of fulfillment. It connects you to something bigger than yourself, and that gives you energy, purpose, and resilience. And another pattern that creates unstoppable momentum is the pattern of certainty. Not arrogance, certainty. It's the belief that no matter what happens, you'll figure it out. When that becomes your pattern, fear loses its grip. You no longer need to control every outcome. You trust yourself to adapt, to grow, to overcome. That level of self-trust doesn't come from wishing, it comes from conditioning. Every time you face fear and move anyway, you're engraving the pattern of certainty deeper into your identity. And you've got to remember, patterns compound. They either compound in your favor or against you. A small negative pattern repeated daily turns into a life of frustration. A small positive pattern repeated daily turns into a life of mastery. That's why awareness is power, because the moment you see your pattern, you can change it. But if you stay blind to it, it will control you for years without you even realizing it. And so, start observing yourself like a scientist. Notice what triggers your reactions. Notice what stories you tell yourself when you face resistance. Notice what emotions you return to when things don't go your way. Don't judge yourself, just notice. Because awareness is the first step toward transformation. Once you see it, you can interrupt it. Once you interrupt it, you can replace it. And once you replace it consistently, the new pattern becomes who you are. And when you hit that point, when the new pattern feels natural, that's when you're truly free. Because you're no longer fighting yourself. Your habits, your emotions, your thoughts, they're all aligned with your vision. You're no longer pushing uphill. You're being pulled forward by momentum. The things that used to drain you now fuel you. The fears that used to paralyze you now excite you. You've reprogrammed your nervous system to see challenge as opportunity, failure as feedback, and discomfort as progress. And that's the level where people look at you and say, you're different. But what they're really noticing is your patterns. They feel your consistency, your certainty, your energy even before you say a word. Because true power isn't loud, it's consistent. It's the quiet confidence of someone who has built patterns so strong that nothing external can shake them. And you can live that way too. You can train yourself to respond to life instead of react to it. You can build a pattern of resilience so deep that even when life knocks you down, your automatic response is to rise. You can build a pattern of faith so unshakable that doubt doesn't get to stay for long. You can build a pattern of courage that makes fear irrelevant. It's all conditioning, it's all training, and it's all within your control, and the key is to start now. Don't wait for the perfect time. Don't wait until you feel ready, because readiness is also a pattern, and most people's pattern is to wait. Waiting becomes the reason they stay stuck. Action breaks that pattern instantly. Every time you take action when it's hard, you're sending a powerful message to your brain. I am not controlled by hesitation. I am not controlled by fear. I am the one who decides, and that's how you become unstoppable, not by wishing for an easier life, but by conditioning stronger patterns. Patterns that make you rise, patterns that make you push, patterns that make you believe even when it hurts. Because once those patterns take hold, there's no force on earth that can stop you from becoming everything you were meant to be. And when those patterns start to run deep, you stop second, guessing who you are. You don't wake up wondering if you can do it, you wake up knowing you will. You don't waste time debating whether it's possible. Your mind automatically searches for how to make it happen. Because your subconscious has learned the rhythm of progress, the pattern of persistence, the pattern of certainty. That's when success stops being something you chase and starts being something you embody. It becomes your default setting. And most people never reach that state because they underestimate how powerful their conditioning really is. They think willpower is enough, but willpower fades, patterns last. Willpower gets you started, patterns keep you going when motivation disappears. That's why people can go to a seminar, get fired up for a week, then fall right back into their old habits. Their environment changes temporarily, but their patterns never did. And your life never changes permanently until your patterns do. And every emotion you experience follows a pattern. Every reaction you have is a conditioned loop. Think of anger, it has a rhythm, doesn't it? You feel wronged, your breathing changes, your voice rises, your focus narrows, your muscles tense. That's a pattern, so is fear, so is joy, so is confidence. Each has a sequence your nervous system runs automatically. If you interrupt that sequence even once, you can start breaking it. That's why power begins with awareness. Because when you can recognize your emotional sequences, you gain the ability to change them mid-stream. And you can choose to change your body, your tone, your focus, and instantly shift how you feel. And when you shift how you feel, you shift what you do. And when you shift what you do, you shift your results. Every change in destiny starts with a change in emotional pattern. That's the real power, not controlling the world, but mastering your internal patterns so deeply that nothing outside of you has the power to derail you. And you might think, that sounds great, but how do I make that real? You start small. Every time you catch yourself slipping into an old pattern, interrupt it immediately. Don't negotiate with it, don't analyze it, just break it. Stand up, move, change your breath, speak out loud a new command to yourself. Replace hesitation with motion, replace doubt with declaration, replace worry with focus. Every interruption is a signal to your brain, the old pattern is no longer in charge. And the more often you interrupt, the weaker the old loop becomes. The more you reinforce the new pattern, the stronger your identity grows. Because repetition is how the brain learns what matters. It's how the nervous system decides what's safe, what's normal, what's you. If you've repeated fear enough, your brain calls it safety. If you've repeated confidence enough, your brain calls that safety instead. That's why the most powerful transformations happen not in a single moment of decision, but in the daily conditioning that follows. And you don't need to rebuild yourself in one day. You just need to start conditioning yourself differently every day. 10 minutes of focus can shift everything. 10 minutes of physical energy, gratitude, and intensity can rewire an entire morning. You could wake up feeling drained, but if you train your pattern to move, breathe deep, and flood your body with energy, you instantly shift from survival to strength. Because energy is not luck, it's conditioned, and the pattern that controls your energy controls your life. And the truth is, everything is a pattern, even the stories you tell yourself. Some people live in the story of I'm not enough. Others live in the story of I always find a way. Which one do you think wins long term? The words you use when you talk to yourself form your mental patterns. Say, I can't, enough times and your brain will make it a command. Say, I can, with certainty and your brain will search for evidence. Your story is not fate. It's just a pattern of words you've repeated long enough to believe. And so, what story have you been practicing? The story of limitation or the story of possibility? You can rewrite it any moment you decide to. The moment you choose to speak a new language to yourself, words of strength, power, and conviction, you start rewiring your subconscious identity. And identity is what sustains action when everything else fades, because when something becomes who you are, it's not effort anymore. It's automatic, and that's why you must make your vision part of your pattern. Don't just write your goals, embody them. See them daily, speak them daily, feel them daily, because your brain doesn't respond to wishes, it responds to consistency. When you repeatedly visualize your goal with emotion and movement, your nervous system begins to believe it's real. You start taking actions that align with that future automatically. You don't have to force it, you've trained it. But let's be real, building new patterns isn't always easy. There will be days your old identity will fight to stay alive. Your brain will whisper, just this once, take it easy, you've done enough. That's the test, that's the exact moment when the new pattern is being built. Every time you push through that resistance, you're carving a deeper groove into your identity. That's where confidence comes from, evidence. Not talking about it, not dreaming about it, but showing your brain proof that you can act beyond your feelings. And when that becomes a pattern, you become unstoppable, because now your brain expects you to follow through. You've trained yourself to execute. You've built the pattern of action over the pattern of excuse. You've programmed yourself to perform regardless of how you feel. That's the edge. That's what separates those who dabble from those who dominate, and momentum becomes your ally. It's a law of life. The more you do something, the easier it becomes to keep doing it. Once a new pattern gains momentum, it starts feeding itself. You begin to crave the behaviors that once felt hard. The morning workout that felt impossible becomes your fuel. The daily focus that used to require discipline becomes your normal. The courage that once took everything in you becomes your comfort zone. Because the pattern is now part of you, and that's when your entire world begins to shift. Your relationships change because you show up differently. Your opportunities expand because you attract from a higher vibration. Your mindset becomes resilient because struggle no longer defines you. The pattern of power becomes your emotional baseline. You don't wait for perfect circumstances, you create them through consistent alignment. And you see, life doesn't reward intention, it rewards pattern. Everyone intends to be great, but only those who consistently pattern greatness into their behavior experience it. And that's the real secret, not luck, not timing, not privilege. It's pattern conditioning. What you rehearse daily is what you live permanently. And you can't control every event in life, but you can absolutely control your patterns. You can decide how you interpret pain, how you respond to pressure, how you react to fear. You can decide to pattern strength, not weakness. You can decide to pattern growth, not excuses. You can decide to pattern purpose, not distraction. Every decision to align with those patterns stacks power on top of power. And you'll notice something extraordinary as your internal patterns evolve. life starts responding differently to you. The right people appear, the right opportunities align, the wrong energy disappears, because the world reflects the energy you project, and your patterns control that projection. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you're patterned for. And so if you want abundance, build patterns of gratitude and giving. If you want success, build patterns of focus and relentless execution. If you want peace, build patterns of mindfulness and self-control. If you want love, build patterns of kindness and empathy. The outer world bends to the rhythm of your inner patterns. And when you understand this, you stop chasing results and start mastering rhythms. You start living intentionally, conditioning your state before life tests you, not after. You prime yourself every morning with energy, gratitude, vision, and purpose. You strengthen your body because it amplifies your mind. You guard your thoughts because they form your patterns. You protect your standards because they define your boundaries. You stop letting randomness decide who you become, and then one day it all clicks. You wake up and realize that the person you used to dream of being, confident, focused, alive, certain, is the person you've patterned yourself into. You're not pretending anymore, you're not chasing anymore, you've become it. You've trained your nervous system to live in that identity until it became your home. And that's what mastery looks like. Not perfection, not luck, but daily repetition of empowerment until it becomes instinct. The same way, a pianist doesn't think about each note or an athlete doesn't think about every movement, it's just flow. You become that in life, flowing with focus, with intention, with confidence. Because your patterns are aligned with your purpose fuels your passion, and your passion drives your performance. And when you live that way, life stops being a constant struggle. It becomes a dance between intention and execution. You move, you grow, you expand, and the world expands with you. Because patterns once mastered don't just make you stronger, they make you unstoppable. And when you reach that level of alignment, something inside of you shifts permanently. You stop chasing validation because you already know your worth. You stop looking for permission because you've given yourself authority over your own life. You start walking with a level of certainty that people can feel before you even speak. Because when your patterns are aligned with your purpose, your energy announces you before your words ever do. You no longer need to convince anyone of your value. Your consistency has already proven it. But don't be fooled, this alignment doesn't mean everything becomes easy. It means you've trained yourself to handle difficulty differently. When challenges come, you no longer collapse, you adapt. When pressure rises, you don't shrink, you expand, because you've built the pattern of responding, not reacting. You've built the pattern of seeing opportunity where others see obstacles. That's what makes you unstoppable. It's not that you avoid storms, it's that you've conditioned yourself to navigate through them with power and composure. And you see, every challenge in life is just an invitation to refine your patterns. When you face a setback, it's not punishment, it's feedback. It's showing you which of your patterns need upgrading. Maybe your pattern of patience needs reinforcement. Maybe your pattern of self-belief needs strengthening. Life isn't testing your limits, it's testing your conditioning. And the moment you see adversity that way, you stop running from it, you start learning from it, you start growing through it. And that's why struggle is a gift when you understand its purpose. It's the resistance that makes you stronger. It's the friction that sharpens your focus. It's the fire that forges your resilience, and once you build a pattern of embracing that resistance instead of avoiding it, life opens up. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what pattern is this trying to teach me? That one shift transforms pain into power, setbacks into stepping stones, fear into fuel. And the key to maintaining that strength is emotional conditioning. Your emotions are habits, patterns you've practiced over time. Some people practice stress so often that it becomes their default. Others practice joy so consistently that happiness becomes automatic. You get to choose which emotion becomes your home, because emotion is energy, and that energy shapes every decision you make, every conversation you have, every action you take. If you practice gratitude daily, your emotional home becomes abundance. If you practice discipline daily, your emotional home becomes confidence. But don't wait to feel like it. Feelings are followers, not leaders. You lead with action and emotion follows. When you take charge of your motion, your movement, your breathing, your focus, your emotion shifts automatically. That's why people who move with energy tend to think with clarity. Motion rewires emotion. It's why your physical rituals matter. You can't build powerful mental patterns if your body's pattern is fatigue, laziness, and inconsistency. Energy must be trained like a muscle. The more you practice vitality, the more vitality becomes your default. And here's something most people never understand. Discipline isn't punishment. Discipline is freedom. Because once you've conditioned the pattern of discipline, you no longer rely on mood, motivation, or luck. You've built internal certainty. You don't have to think twice about doing what needs to be done, you just do it. You've eliminated the debate. That's power. The pattern of discipline liberates you from the chaos of indecision. It replaces should I with I will. And every great achievement, every breakthrough, every transformation you've ever witnessed was the result of someone mastering their patterns long enough to outlast their excuses. It wasn't luck, it was conditioning. The people who rise aren't those who never fail. They're the ones who refuse to let failure define their next move. They've practiced resilience until it became reflex. They've practiced faith until it became instinct. They've practiced action until it became automatic, and you have that same capacity. You can train yourself to become unstoppable by aligning your patterns with your potential. You can create rituals that anchor your power every single day. You can program your mind to see opportunity where you once saw threat. You can condition your focus to seek growth instead of comfort. You can rewire yourself from the inside out. That's not fantasy, that's biology. Your brain is designed to adapt. Your nervous system is wired to evolve. All it needs is repetition and emotion, and that's why every day matters, every repetition matters. The way you start your morning sets the pattern for your day. The way you respond to stress sets the pattern for your decisions. The way you speak to yourself sets the pattern for your self-belief. Each moment is an opportunity to condition strength or weakness, empowerment or excuse. The choice is always yours, and it's in those small, seemingly insignificant choices that your destiny is built. And because the truth is, there's no such thing as standing still. You're either reinforcing old patterns or creating new ones. You're either evolving or decaying. Every thought, every behavior, every word you speak is feeding one pattern or another. The question is, which pattern are you strengthening, the pattern of progress or the pattern of procrastination? The pattern of courage or the pattern of comfort? The pattern of expansion or the pattern of fear? And once you start choosing consciously, life begins to respond differently. You start meeting people who match your new energy. You start attracting opportunities that align with your higher standards. You start noticing synchronicities that didn't exist before. It's not magic, it's momentum. You've shifted your frequency by shifting your patterns. The universe simply reflects what you've conditioned yourself to expect. And you'll notice that when your patterns change, your self-image transforms too. You begin to look at yourself differently. You stop identifying with the version of you that struggled to stay consistent. You stop relating to the person who needed motivation to move. Instead, you see yourself as capable, focused, powerful, because that's who you've practiced being. Identity follows repetition. The more you live as that person, the more your brain locks it in as your truth. And once identity shifts, everything else becomes effortless, because behavior always follows identity. You don't need to force yourself to act like someone who succeeds. You've become that someone. You don't need to psych yourself up to chase goals. Your habits are already aligned with them. Your energy is different, your language is different, your focus is different. You've turned patterns into personality and personality into destiny. But remember this, patterns are always in motion, they don't freeze, which means you must constantly refine them. You can't rely on yesterday's discipline to build tomorrow's dreams. You have to stay conscious, stay hungry, stay intentional. The moment you stop feeding empowering patterns, disempowering ones will start sneaking back in. So guard your standards, guard your rituals, guard your focus, because the cost of neglecting your patterns is mediocrity, and mediocrity is the slowest form of death. And you have to live with a sense of deliberate repetition, the kind that conditions excellence. Excellence isn't random, it's patterned precision. It's doing what's right even when it's boring. It's choosing growth even when it's uncomfortable. It's showing up even when no one's watching. Every time you do that, you build a layer of strength that becomes unshakable. And here's the beauty: once you've built these patterns, you become a force of influence, because energy is contagious. People feel your presence, they start adjusting to your frequency. Your pattern of confidence gives them permission to believe in themselves. Your pattern of persistence gives them courage to keep going. Your pattern of gratitude helps them find light in their darkness. You begin to lead without trying, simply by being patterned for power. And that's how movements begin, not with words, but with examples. One person patterns greatness so deeply that others start sinking to it. They see the consistency, the passion, the results, and they realize it's possible for them too. You become a living reminder that change is real, that growth is attainable, that power can be built. And you don't inspire through perfection, you inspire through persistence, through the daily commitment to keep shaping yourself into something more. And that's the ripple effect of mastering your patterns. You elevate not just your life, but the lives around you. You stop being a passenger in your story and start being the author. You stop letting circumstance define your emotions and start defining your circumstances through your emotions. You take command of your focus, your energy, your direction. And with each day that you live with that intention, your patterns carve the path to a destiny that no one and nothing can take from you.